So in last session we discussed about schema, delete, truncate, and the difference between delete and truncate and identity property and all, right? Now in this session let's discuss about data integrity. So what is mean by data integrity? So this data integrity is very important for the data in the database to be accurate, consistent, and reliable. So this data integrity ensures that the consistency and correctness of the data that is stored in the database. So okay, by using the data types, already we discussed about the data types, right? Using the data types, we are just giving hint to the server saying that just insert only numerics into that integer column. Just accept only dates into the date column. So that kind of um, constraint we are following with the data types, using the data types. So what is data integrity means? So whenever you're trying to store the data in database, we need to give assurance to the client saying that, let's say there is one table called accounts. In accounts table, account ID won't allow the duplicates. Because if the bank gives the same account ID to multiple guys, what happens? So transactions, it's unnecessary transactions and unnecessary headaches, right? Account ID, otherwise employee ID. So employee ID, never this employee ID will be duplicated. So whatever the ID which is mine, the same employee ID won't be given to any another employee. And without employee ID, no employee will work in a company. Same way, account numbers, no account number will be duplicated. So the same number, whatever the number I'm having, the same number, nobody can have the same account number. And the same way, without account number, no one can do any transactions in the bank, right? So this column, we need to give assurance to the client saying that this employee ID column won't accept any duplicates and any nulls. So we have to give that assurance. It should be accurate. So it has to allow only unique values and don't allow the nulls. And there is one another column, let's say the column is gender. So universal known truth, we have only two types of genders, that is male and female. So apart from male or female, if the user is trying to pass any value into that column, it has to throw it there. That consistency we need to maintain here. We need to give that assurance to the client saying that into that gender column, if the user inserts male or female, it will accept. Apart from male or female, if the user is trying to insert any another value, it will throw error. It won't accept. So that kind of assurance we need to give to the client while storing the data in the database. And there is one another column, let's say the column is city. See, my main branch is located in Hyderabad. So whenever I'm inserting the records into the table, that employee table or accounts or whatever it may be, if I didn't pass any value into city column, by default it has to populate with one value. That is Hyderabad, because my main branch is located in Hyderabad, so it has to populate the value as Hyderabad. So that is my client requirement. It's not a static one, it's a client requirement. So into that particular column, if the user is passing any value, then accept that value. If the user is not inserting any value into that column, then populate that value with the default value. Insert one default value. So these kind of assurance, these kind of accuracy we need to maintain while storing the data in the database. So we'll call that one as data integrity. So this data integrity broadly classified into four categories. So the first one is entity integrity, and the second one is domain integrity, third one is referential integrity, and the fourth one is user defined integrity. So we have four types of integrities. So first let's start with entity integrity. So what is meant by entity integrity? Entity integrity ensures that each row in a table is unique. So whatever the data you are inserting into the table, that column will allow only unique data. It won't allow the duplicate data. So that integrity will fall under entity integrity. So here if you observe employee ID 1, 2, 3, sorry, 3, 4, 5, 6. So like that it will accept only unique data into the table. If the user is trying to pass any duplicate data, it will throw error. So this integrity, if you want to maintain this kind of integrity, this will fall under entity integrity. So entity integrity ensures each row in a table is unique. So example for this entity integrity and entity integrity is primary key, and unique. So we'll call these one as constraints. So using constraints, we can achieve this integrity concept. So once we finish this integrity, we'll jump into constraints, how to create how to add the constraints to the columns and all, and how it works. We'll see that one. But as of now, let me complete the remaining integrities. So the next one, what is the next one? Domain integrity. So domain integrity ensures that only valid range of values are allowed to be stored in a column. Only valid range of values will be allowed to store in the column. So what I mean by valid range of values? So valid range of values are nothing but, see, gender. Apart from male or female, don't accept anything, any another value. So this is one range I'm looking for. Apart from male or female, if the user is trying to pass any another value, don't accept it. So that is the range. And let's say city column, let's say my company is located in 4 locations: Hyderabad, Bangalore, Chennai, and Mumbai. So this is the table, employee table. So where employees will live then? So my company is located in Hyderabad, Bangalore, Chennai, and Mumbai. So employees will live in the surround areas only, right? So while inserting the data into the table, if the user inserts the value, like if the user passed the value like Hyderabad, Bangalore, Chennai, and Mumbai, then accept the values. Apart from this Hyderabad, Chennai, Bangalore, Mumbai, if the user pass any another value, don't accept. That is not a valid range. So where I'm looking for the range, Hyderabad, Bangalore, Chennai, and Mumbai. That is my range. So if the value, whatever you are inserting, if that is in the range, then accept the value. Otherwise, just skip that value. Otherwise, throw the error. For example, I'm running one big software company, and in my company, so many employees will work, right? And I need I need to pay salaries to the employees. So to any employee, so even my office boy also is getting more than 10,000 rupees. So whenever the user inserts salary less than or equal to 10,000, don't accept the value. If the salary is greater than 10,000, then only accept it. Why? Because in my company, no one is getting less than or equal to 10,000 rupees, so no need to mean. If I accept the value, is that valid one? That is not valid, right? So that there I'm looking for the range is the salary should be greater than 10,000. So all these ranges will fall under domain integrity. So this domain integrity ensures only valid range of values can be inserted into a column. So example for this one is check constraint and default. Now let's see the next one, that is referential integrity. So what is meant by referential integrity? Referential integrity is nothing but while inserting the data into the table, before inserting the data, first it has to go and check the reference from another table. If the reference is available, then only allow the data, otherwise just keep the data. I mean, don't allow the data. That is referential integrity. Let's say, for example, here, let me insert one column. Oh, sorry, delete. Insert. Okay. Now, I'm creating one table, employee table with the structure employee ID, name, gender, city, and salary. And in my company, 4 employees are working. Let me give the names: Vijay, Pranay, Sanjay, Vinay. So male, female, and some whatever it may be. Let me delete the column here. So in employee table, I'm maintaining the employee information like employee ID, name of an employee, gender of an employee, and in which location he is living. So that means city of an employee. Now, so I'll maintain the employee salary details in one another table. Employee salary ID. So who is getting the salary? So that is employee salary ID, and in which month he got the salary, and what is his salary. So this is the structure of my salaries table. Employee ID 1, in January his salary is 1 lakh. Employee ID 2, in January his salary is 90,000 or 80,000. And employee ID 1, February, his salary is 90,000. And employee ID 3, in February, his salary is 60,000. And employee ID 4, in March, his salary is 80,000. In employee ID 1, in April, his salary is 1,20,000. And employee ID 5, in April, his salary is 1.5 lakh. And employee ID 6, his salary in May 1.5 lakh again, otherwise 1,40,000. If I insert the data like this, is it valid? In my company, only 4 employees are working. Their employee IDs are 1, 2, 3, 4. So to whom I need to pay the salaries? To the employees who are working in my company. I need to pay salary to only those guys. But while giving the salary here, if you observe, first employee, yes, that employee is working in my company, so no issues of paying the salary. And second employee, yes, second employee is also working in the company. First employee, yes, he is working. Third employee is working. Fourth employee is working. First employee is working. But what about this fifth employee and sixth employee? This is not a valid data, right? This fifth employee and sixth employee, these two guys are not working in my company, even though I'm paying salaries to these guys. So who are they? We don't know that one. So this is not a valid insertion. So whenever you are trying to insert the data into this table, before inserting the data into the table, first this column has to go and check the reference from this column. If the reference is available, then only insert the data into the table. Then what happens? If I design the table like whenever the user is trying to insert the data into the salary table, this ESID column has to go and take the reference from employee ID. Then what happens? So whenever you are inserting first record, right? First one, if first it will go and check for the employee ID 1, yes, that is available, so it inserts the record. And employee ID 2, yes, the reference is available, it inserts the record. Employee ID 1, yes, that is available, insert it. Employee ID 3, yes, available, insert it. Employee ID 4, insert it. Employee ID 1, insert it. But when I'm trying to insert employee ID 5, and when it is going and looking for the reference, when it is going and looking for the reference, there the reference is not available. There the reference is not available. So what happens? So immediately it won't allow the users to insert the record. Now when again I'm trying to insert the sixth record, 6th ID record, it will go and check the reference for the 6th ID. Again, the reference is not available for 6th employee ID, so immediately it won't allow the users to insert the record. That is nothing but referential integrity. So whenever we are trying to insert the data into the salaries table, I mean whatever the table may be, whenever we are trying to insert the data into a table, first it has to go and take the reference from another table. If the reference is available, then only allow the users to insert the record. If the reference is not available, then don't allow the users to insert the data into the table. That is called referential integrity. So, example for this referential integrity is foreign key. So the last one is user defined integrity. With the name, it's pretty clear. The integrity which is defined by the user will fall under user defined integrity. So it does not belong to the entity or domain and referential integrity categories. So example for this one is rules and defaults. So these are data integrity categories. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So now let's see constraints. So this data integrity is a concept. So to achieve that concept, we'll use these constraints. So entity integrity, which allows only unique values. So example, primary key and unique key. So they are constraints. Check default constraint, foreign key constraints, rules and defaults also constraints. So constraint is nothing but a restriction where we can place on top of a column. So data type is also one kind of restriction, right? One kind of constraint. Integer, it will allow only numerics. We are restricting the users to insert only numerics into the column. Date, we are restricting the users to insert only date values into the column. Image, we are restricting the users to insert only image data into the column. So we are restricting the type of the data using data types. So what constraints will do here is we can make sure the data, whatever the data which is inserted by the user, we can give some assurance to the data saying that it won't allow the duplicates. So using constraints, we can make sure the column should not have any duplicates, any nulls, otherwise only valid range of values can be inserted into the column, or whatever the data which is inserted into the table, that data is having the proper reference. So we can make sure that uh, we can maintain that accuracy using these constraints. So these constraints can be either created at the time of creating the table or after creating the table. So first I'll show you how to add the constraints while creating the table. Okay. After that we'll see how to add the constraints after creating the table. Adding constraints while creating the table. So first let's start with primary key. So what is mean by primary key? So primary key is a field which uniquely identify each row in a table. So primary key is a field which uniquely identify each row in a table. Let's say for example employee ID. If you take the employee table, let's say, let me close this one. See, one employee ID Vijay Mail Hyderabad, and here I'm giving one another employee ID 5 whose name is also Vijay, he is male and he is living in Hyderabad. So in one company, multiple employees will be there, right, with the same name. So in a company, let's say it's a big organization. In that organization, so many thousands of employees will work. So out of the 1,000 employees, Vijay name will be, when you can find that Vijay name in for multiple employees. With the same name, you can find multiple employees. Then how can you identify these employees? I mean, how can you differentiate these employees? How will you identify unique employee here? So that just depends on ID of an employee. So whose employee ID is 5? His name is Vijay, is a male, and he is living in Hyderabad. But he is a different guy. But and employee ID 1 is a different guy. So primary key is a field in a table which uniquely identifies each row in a table. So this is the primary key. It is using to identify each row uniquely in the table. So primary key must contain unique values. Primary key won't allow the duplicates and it won't allow the nulls. Why? Because without employee ID, no employee will work in the company, right? So primary key won't allow the nulls and it won't allow the duplicates. That is primary. And one table can have only one primary key, not more than. One table can have only one primary key. Let's see how to create that one. So create table. I'm creating a table with the name employee ID int constraint. Here we need to specify a name to the constraint. I'm giving it as pk underscore id and primary key. This is the type of constraint, primary key, comma name varchar of 20. So I'm just creating a table employee with two columns. One is ID and name, where the ID is primary. Now let me exit this one. Commands completed successfully. Now let's see the table. Let me expand the databases and let me refresh this training database. Tables, employee, columns. If you see ID, here this ID column is acting as a primary key, where primary key won't allow the duplicates and it won't allow the nulls. See here it has taken the null type as not null, which means it won't allow the nulls. And if I expand this keys pk underscore id, this is the name I've given to that primary key. Now let's see whether it is working according to the definition or not. Let me insert the records into the table. Insert into employee values, employee ID 1, name of an employee VijayReddy. Let me copy this stick card. Copy. I'm inserting two records into the table. One VijayReddy and the second one is Sharath. Now let's execute it. One row affected and one row affected. Now if you check the table, select star from employee. See, these are the two records which I have in my table. Now let me insert another record. I'm just giving the employee ID as 2 and name of an employee as Pranay. Now when I try to insert this record into the table, it will throw error saying that violation of primary key constraint. You cannot insert the duplicate key into the object employee. The duplicate key value is 2. So by seeing this error message, it's clearly saying that you cannot insert the duplicate keys, duplicate values into the column, and the duplicate value what you're trying to insert is 2. So primary key won't allow the duplicates. So 2 is the duplicate ID which is already existing in the table, so that's why it is throwing error. Now let me insert another record into the table. I just know the name of an employee. I don't know ID of an employee. Name, values. I'm giving the name as Sanjay. Now if I try to insert the record into the table, see again it is saying it is saying that cannot insert the value null into column ID table employee column does not allow nulls. So primary key column won't allow the duplicates and it won't allow the nulls. That is primary key. So whenever you want to make that column as unique, and if you don't want to allow nulls into the column, then just give the constraint as primary. So as I said, one table can have only one primary key. Employee table, so employee ID will use it as a primary key. Accounts table, account ID, otherwise account number will use it as a primary key. Products table, product ID will use it as a primary key. So like that. Which column you want to identify uniquely will go with will add primary key constraint on top of the table. And the next constraint is unique. Unique constraint also this constraint is also won't allow the duplicates. Unique constraint won't allow the duplicates just like primary key. So primary key is not allowing the duplicates. So unique constraint also won't allow the duplicates. Then what is the difference between this primary key and unique? Primary key is not allowing the duplicates and unique constraint is also not allowing the duplicates. Then what is the difference? So there is one simple difference there between unique and primary key. We'll see that one. So before that, first let me do one thing. Let me drop the table, employee table. Drop employee table. Now let me copy this one. Copy. And let's see. Now I'm going to create a table employee with the structure ID where it is acting as a primary key, name, comma, mobile number. Mobile number, varchar of 40. Now let's create the table. Just like primary key, unique key won't allow the won't allow the duplicates. 950213312 950, what is that? 9502133 So I'm inserting two records into the table. Let's see, check the table now. Select star from employee. Now let's exit and see. See, these are the two records which I inserted into the table. Now, as I said, unique constraint also won't allow the duplicates. Let me give the employee ID as 3 and name of an employee as Pranay. And here I'm giving the same mobile number which is already existing in the table. Now if I try to insert the data, oh, my mistake. Actually, I created the table with 3 columns, but I forgot to add this unique constraint on mobile number. So my mistake. So let me drop the table again and let me add the constraint, unique constraint on mobile number column. Mobile number constraint uq underscore mobile. Just I'm giving a name to the constraint, that is uq underscore mo, and unique is the type of the constraint. Now let's create it. Commands complete successfully. You can check the constraint here. Let me refresh the tables. Let me expand employee table and let me expand the columns. And here mobile number. See, mobile number. If you observe the difference here, you can get the difference. Primary key, not null. Unique, null. Which means primary key won't allow the duplicates and unique won't allow the duplicates. But primary key won't allow the nulls. But here unique is allowing the nulls. But it won't allow multiple nulls. Unique constraint will accept only one null into the column. I'll explain that one again. So as of now, I just created the table, right? Now let me insert the 2 records into the table. And now let's check the table now. Select star from employee. So these are the 2 records which I have with me. Now I'm going to insert another record into the table where the mobile number is already existing. If I try to exit this one again, it is clearly giving the message saying that cannot insert duplicate key into the object. The duplicate key value is this one. So 95021333127 number which you are trying to insert, that is already existing, so that is duplicate. You cannot insert it. So that is unique. Unique constraint won't allow the duplicates. Unique constraint won't allow the duplicates. Then what is the difference between unique and primary key? Let me explain that one. Here I know only ID of an employee, name of an employee, but I don't know the mobile number of an employee. Values, employee ID 3, name of an employee is Sanjay. Now let me exit this. See, one repeat. Now if you check this one, see, this unique constraint is allowing the null. Now let me insert another record, fourth record. I'm just giving the employee ID as 4, name of an employee as Ajay. Now if you try to insert the record into the table, it will throw error saying that you cannot insert duplicate into the column. The duplicate key value is null. So unique constraint won't allow the duplicates just like primary key, but it will allow only one null into the column. It will treat that one null as unique value. If you're trying to pass another value, another null, then it will treat it as duplicate value. That is unique constraint. So whenever you get the question like what is the difference between primary key and unique key? Primary key and unique both won't allow the duplicates. The difference is primary key won't allow the nulls, where unique constraint will allow only one null into the column. That is the difference. So this is about unique constraint. Now let's see the next one, that is check. So discuss the check again. What I'm doing, I'm just dropping the table, drop table, employee. Let's execute this one. Commands completed successfully. Now let's see check constraint. So for that, let me copy the structure again. Copy. Let's see the check constraint here. So here again I'm creating a table employee with the structure ID, name, mobile number and gender, where the gender column has to accept only male or female. Apart from male or female, if the user is trying to insert any another value, it has to throw it. So for that, what I'm doing is on top of this gender column, I'm gonna add check constraint. So before accepting the record, before accepting the value into the gender column, first it has to check whether the value is within the range or not. If that is in the range, then accept it. Otherwise, don't accept it. That is check. Let's see. Constraint. I'm giving the name to the constraint as ck_zen. Check. Check. Gender in male or female. So here just I'm giving two values. So I'm just asking the range to male or female. Now let me create it. So commands completed successfully. Now let me insert the data into table. Insert into employees, male, and again it is male, and again it is male, and here ID, name, gender. Let me give it as 128 because that is the duplicate mobile number. So I changed it to unique one. And here 3 is the duplicate one. Now let me give it as 4, and just give the name of a girl, Asha, female. Now when I try to insert these records, this one will accept. To go and check the table, select start from employee. See, gender is accepting this male and female because while checking the consent, while checking for the value, I've given the values as male or female. So whenever the user is trying to pass the value, just check the value whether the value is in the range or not. The range is male or female. Here still now whatever the data I've inserted, all those values are within the range, male and female. So there is no issue. But now if I try to insert any value, any record which is not in the range, I'm giving the employee ID as 5, name of an employee is XYZ, and mobile number as 130. So XYZ, there is no gender for XYZ, so I'm just giving it as not applicable, not any. Now if I try to exit this one is throwing error message saying that the insert statement conflicted with check constraint, conflict occurred at training database on employee table on gender column. So this is check. So whatever the range you have specified, if the value is in the range, then only it will accept the value. If the value is not in the range, it won't accept the value. That is check constraint. Okay. Now let's see the next one. Default. So for that again I'm copying the same, that is a table and all. First I'll drop the table. Default. First let me drop the table. Drop table employee. Now let's execute and see. This command's completed successfully. Now let me create the table. Create table employee with the structure ID, that is a primary key, name, mobile number, that is a unique key, gender, that is a check constraint, and city varchar of 20 constraint. I'm just giving a name to the constraint as def underscore city. So whenever the user is passing any value into the city column, it has to accept it. If the user is not passing any value into the city column, it has to populate one default value. So def underscore city, default is the constraint name, type. Just give it as city. Sorry, it's not city, it's Hyderabad. So whenever the user pass any city, then accept it. If the user is not passing any value, then by default populate the value as HYD. Let me exit and I created the table. Now let me refresh the tables here. Let me expand this employee table and let me expand the columns. And if you see, ID is acting as a primary key. If you expand the keys, primary key and unique key. And if you expand the constraint, check constraint and default constraint. And here, employee, this guy is working in, living in Hyderabad. And this guy is from Bangalore. And this guy is from Chennai. This guy is from Mumbai. So it will accept any value. There is no issue. It will accept any value. So this is not the proper one, right? Let me delete it. Let me exit all these records. There are few columns. Somewhere I'm missing the one. Mumbai, gender, comma, city. Here I need to pass the column. Let me insert it. All rows are affected. Now let's see the table. Select start from employee. See, it has accepted whatever the cities you have passed. It has accepted all the values. Now let me insert another record. Insert into employee. I just know the ID of an employee, name of an employee, mobile number of an employee, city of an employee. No. I just know only these three values. ID of an employee, Already 4 records are there. Let me give it as 5. Name of an employee, Madhu. Mobile number 95021333131. And let's exit and save. Select star from employee. Now let me exit it. When I exit this one, and if you observe the record, 5 employee ID, name of an employee Madhu, and mobile number so and so, and gender is null, and city is Hyderabad. But actually, I didn't inserted that. I didn't pass the city value, right? I didn't pass the city value. By default, it has taken the value. That is default constraint. So whenever the user pass any value into the column, it will accept the values. If the user didn't pass any value into the column, then it will populate one default value, that is default constraint. Okay, so this is default. Now let me show you my employee table here. Let me exit this one. See, in total I have 5 employees in my company with IDs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now let's see the next one, that is foreign key. So what is mean by foreign key? This foreign key has to go and take the reference from another table. If the reference is available, then only it has to access the record. So I'll use my employee table as a reference table, which is giving the reference. And let me create one table. Create table salaries, employee salary ID. I'm using it as int. So this employee salary ID column has to go and take the reference from employee table's ID column. If the reference is available, then only it has to accept the record. If the reference is not available, then it has to throw error. Then let me design the constraint. Foreign key constraint on ESID. Int constraint fk underscore ID foreign key references, because this foreign key is taking the reference from which table, employee table, and in employee table from which column it is taking the reference, from ID column it is taking the reference, comma month, that is varchar of 20, and salary, that is a money data type. Now let me create the table. Commands completed successfully. Now let's check the table. Select star from salaries. See, here's ID, month, salary. So this is the structure of my table. Now let me show you the employee table here. So this is my employee table. Now let me give salaries to those employees. Insert into salaries values ESID 1 month January and salary 1 lakh. Now let me copy it. Second, third, fourth, 5, 6. Okay. 1. I'm giving the employee ID as 2, 3, 5, 6, 9. 90,000, 80,000, 40, 70, 80. Now if I try to insert the records into the table, salaries table, according to the foreign key, what it has to do, first it has to take this employee ID, I mean ESID column, and it has to go and check the reference in employee table's ID column. If the reference is available, then only it has to accept the record. Now when I try to insert the first record, which is having the ID 1, it will accept it. Why? Because employee ID 1 is available in the table, right? Now if I try to insert the second and third IDs, it will accept. Why? Because 2 and 3 IDs are available in my table. Let me exit it. Yes, accepted. Now when I try to insert the fifth ID, will it accept or not? Yes. Why? Because this fifth employee ID's reference is available in employee table. So now if I exit this one, yes, that is fine. But now when I try to insert sixth employee ID, First, it will go and check the reference in employee table. There, the reference is missing. There, the reference is not available. So first, it will throw error saying that insert conflicted with foreign key constraint. The conflict occurred in the database so and so database and so and so table from so and so column. So in employee tables ID column, when I'm looking for the reference is not available for that particular record. I mean that particular ID. Now when I try to insert the next record, that is 9, again it will throw the same error saying that the foreign key conflict. If you have the reference, then it will accept it. So that is foreign key. So that is foreign. So whenever you are inserting the records into the table, first it has to go and take the reference from a reference table. If the reference is available there, then it has to accept it. If the reference is not available, then it has to throw error saying that the reference is missing. That is foreign key. And this is how we can create the constraint. We can add the constraint while creating the table. Now let's see how to add the constraints after creating the table. So for that, what I'll do is I'll drop the tables. Drop table salaries. So first here I'm dropping the salaries table. Drop table employee. Why? Because let me show you that if I try to drop this employee table, it will throw error saying that your employee table is being referenced by some another table. So this employee table is giving the reference to salaries table. So until this salaries table is existing, you can't delete this employee table. First you have to delete the child, then only you can drop the parent. That's why I just dropped the salaries first and employees next. Okay. Now let's see adding constraints after creating the table. So after creating the table, how we can add the constraints, we'll see that now. But whenever you're trying to add the constraints after creating the table, it's better before inserting the data into the table, add the constraint. After creating, before inserting, you have to add the constraints. That is the best one. Okay. After creating the table and before inserting the data, add the constraints. Let's see how to do that one. For that, again, let me create the tables. Create table. Table name I'm giving it as employee. Employee ID int. Name of an employee. Varchar of 20. ID name. Mobile number varchar of 20. Gender varchar of 20. City varchar of 20. Now let me create another table, that is salaries. After creating the table, we'll see how to add the constraints. Salaries, employee ID int, month varchar of 20, and salary money that. Now let's create it. So commands completed successfully. Now let's see how to add the constraint. Again, first let's start with primary key. So primary key won't allow the nulls and it won't allow the duplicates, right? But now if you go and check the table, employee table columns, here the ID column is accepting the nulls. So whenever you add primary key constraint while creating the table, no issues. But after creating the table, if you try to add the primary key constraint, first you have to make sure that whether the column is having not null type or not. If that is not null, then you have to change it. Then only you can add the primary key constraint. So here when I see that ID column is not null. So it is expecting null. So it will accept nulls. So first what I need to do, I need to change that null type into not null. So let me do that one first. Alter table, table name employee, alter column, id int not null. Now let me exit it. Now let's refresh these columns. Now this id will convert into not null. Now you can apply the primary key. You can add the primary key constraint. Alter table, which table? Employee table. And what you want to do? I want to add constraint. What is the name of the constraint? pk underscore id. So what is the type of the constraint? Primary key. On which column you want to add this constraint? On id column I want to add this constraint. That's it. Check it. Columns. Now this id is converted in. I've added the primary constraint pk underscore id. It's very simple. So here I'm not showing by inserting the data because again this primary key won't allow the duplicates and it won't allow the nulls. So no need to show that one. That's why I'm not showing that one. So directly I'm going to the next concept, that is unique. NIQEE, unique. So alter, again the same statements, same syntax. Alter table, which table you want to alter? Employee table. And what you want to do by altering the table? I want to add the constraint. What name you want to give to the constraint? I want to give the name as u2 underscore mobile. And what is the type of the constraint? Unique. And on top of which column you want to add this constraint? On top of this mobile number I want to add this unique constraint. Commands completed successfully. Let's refresh this one. Check it. So, databases, training, tables, employee, keys. See, you can underscore. Now let's see check constraint. Check. Again the same syntax. Alter table. Which table you want to alter? I want to alter this employee table. By altering this table, what you want to do? I want to add the constraint. And what name you want to give to that constraint? I want to give it as ck underscore zen. And what type of constraint you want to add? Check constraint. And on which column you want to add that constraint? On gender column. On gender column, what kind, what range you are looking for? Male or female? That's it. Now let's execute and see. Commands completed successfully. Now let me refresh this employee table. You can check and you can check the constraint. ck underscore zen. This is how we can add check constraint. Now let's see the default. So again the syntax will remain same. Alter table. Which table you want to alter? I want to alter this employee table. What you want to do by altering the table? I want to add a constraint. And what is the name to that constraint? Def underscore city. On which column you want to add this constraint? On city column I want to add this. So before that, first we need to specify the type of the constraint, that is default. So which value you want to use as a default? I want to use Hyderabad as default. For which column? For city column. Now let's execute and see. Correct syntax. df hyphen, it's not hyphen, it's underscore. Hyphens won't work. Commands completed successfully. Now let's refresh the constraint. He'll find this. Now let's see the next one, that is foreign key constraint. Foreign key. Alter table. I want to alter the salaries table. Salaries to add foreign key constraint. Add constraint. So what is the name to the constraint? pk underscore esid. What is the type of the constraint? Foreign key. foreign. So on which column you want to add this constraint? Add this foreign key constraint. On top of this esid column, I want to add this constraint. This column has to take the reference from employee tables id column. Now let's execute it. Following referencing tables, invalid column name. It's not ESID. So what is that then? Salaries columns. It's CID. Let me remove it. It's not ESID. Now let's execute it. Command completed successfully. Let's refresh the columns in salaries table. Now you can find the foreign key here. Keys FK underscore ESID. So this is how we can add the constraints while creating the table and after creating the table. Now my intention is I want to drop the constraints, and on top of the city column I've added one default constraint, right? Now my intention is I want to drop the default constraint, otherwise check constraint, otherwise primary key, otherwise foreign key, whatever the constraint may be. My intention is to drop the constraints. So just now we have seen how to add the constraints, so we'll see how to drop the constraints now. So to drop the constraints, syntax will be alter table. From which table you want to alter the drop the constraints. Drop constraint. What is the name of the constraint? Now my intention is I want to drop default constraint from employee table. So alter table employee drop constraint. So what is the name of the default constraint? def underscore city. So def underscore city. Now let's execute and see. Commands complete successfully. Now let's refresh the constraints. See, the constraint is dropped. So this is how we can add the constraints. So these are the constraints which fall under entity, domain and referential integrity. Is it clear? Now let's see the next one, that is user defined integrity. So what is meant by user defined integrity? So user defined integrity which is defined by the user, simplest definition. Otherwise user defined integrity which will not fall under entity, domain and referential integrities. That is user defined integrity. So under this user defined integrities, we have user can create rules and defaults. So these are the objects which helps the data integrity. So these objects are bounded to the columns to ensure that only valid values are allowed to insert into the table. So rule acts like check constraint. Default acts like default constraint. Then what is the difference here? Rule is acting like a check constraint, like don't accept any another value apart from male or female. So for that directly you can add the check constraint, right? Why we need to define the rule again? Why we need to design the rule? What is the purpose? Let's say, for example, this is employee table. In this employee table, I have a column called city, where the city column has to accept only the values, that is Hyderabad, Bangalore, Mumbai, Chennai. Okay, so this is employee table. This table, in this table I have one column called city. This column has to accept only 4 cities, that is Hyderabad, Bangalore, Mumbai and Chennai. And we have another table, customer. In this customer table also I have another column, that is city. So where the city column is expecting only 4 values, that is Hyderabad, Bangalore, Mumbai and Chennai. So what we'll do, while creating the table or after creating the table, we'll add check constraint on top of the city column with the same validations, the same range. And with the same range I'll add another constraint on top of the city column on customer table. And the same way I have another table. Let's say the table name is branches. So in this branches table also have one column called city, where the city column will has to accept only the four values, that is Hyderabad, Bangalore, Mumbai, and Chennai. So again, what I'll do, again, I'll add the constraint on city column, right? And in the same way, I have another column called, sorry, not another column, another table, employee, customers, branches, and suppliers. Let's say I have another table called suppliers, where the suppliers table is also having one column called city. This column is looking for only four values, that is Hyderabad, Bangalore, Mumbai, and Chennai. It has to accept only those four values. So for that, again, I'll add check constraint on top of that column, right? On top of the city column. So what we are doing here? So whenever the condition comes, like that column has to accept only Hyderabad, Bangalore, Mumbai, and Chennai, in all the places we are adding the check constraint. We are writing the same code again and again, again and again. Instead of that, what we'll do is we'll define it as a rule in one place. With that code, we'll define it as a rule in one place, and we can add this rule on all the columns wherever it requires. Instead of adding the constraint again and again, instead of defining the code, otherwise instead of writing the code again and again, we'll just create it in one place, and we'll just create it in one place as rule, and we can use it in all the places wherever it requires. We just bound that rule to all the columns wherever it requires. That's it. Now let's say tomorrow one another table is I created one another table, that is accounts table, otherwise some XYZ, some vendors table. In vendors table also I have one another column city. Again, this city column also has to accept only the values from Hyderabad, Bangalore, Mumbai, and Chennai. So again, instead of adding the check consent, what I'll do is simply I'll bind this rule to the city column. Now the city column will accept only the four cities which I defined in the rule. That is rule. Now whenever I just want to, whenever you want to whenever you want to remove the constraint, you remove this rule from the column, you can remove it. Now this vendor table city column has to accept any city. So just remove this, just unbind this rule. And this supplier city also has to accept any city, and this one also has to accept, and this one accept. In all the cities, if you remove this rule from all the columns, then there is no need of maintaining this rule in server, right? You can directly drop it. So here I'll explain how to create the rule and how to bind the rule to a table. I'll explain it only with one table. You just practice with the remaining tables. I mean, create multiple tables and apply the same rule bind that rule on all the tables. And after that, I'll show you how to unbind the rule and how to drop the rule. Okay. Now, before going to the development, I mean how to create the rules and all, let's discuss the default again. Default now. After discussing that, we'll see what are the syntaxes and all. We'll see the examples. So what default constraint will do? See here again the same example. In city column, if the user inserting any value, if the user passes any value, then accept it. If the user didn't pass any value into that column, into the city column, it has to populate Hyderabad as default value. And the same way in the customers also, this city column has to populate one default value, that is Hyderabad. And in branches, city column has to accept populate Hyderabad as default value. And the suppliers table city column, if I pass any value, then it has to accept it. And if I didn't pass any value, by default it has to populate one another value, that is Hyderabad. So what we have to do then? We have to add default constraint on top of all these columns, right? Instead of that, what I'll do is I'll create default in one place. So this default will populate Hyderabad value as a default value. So wherever this default requires, I'll bind this default to all the columns. Instead of defining it again and again in all the places, I'll just create it in one place and I'll bind that default in all the places wherever it requires. That is default. So these two objects which fall under user defined integrated. Okay. Now let me show you how to create the rules and how to bind, how to unbind, and how to drop these objects. So for to discuss this one, what I'm doing is again I'll create one table. Create table customers ID integer, name varchar of 20, gender varchar of 20, comma city varchar of 20. Now let's create it. Sorry. Commands completed successfully. Now in this customers table, this gender column has to accept only male or female. Otherwise, city column has to accept Hyderabad, Mumbai, Bangalore, and Chennai. Apart from those four values, if the user tries to insert any other value, it has to throw error. So as of now, let me insert a couple of records into the table. Insert into customers ID 1, name of an employee VijayReddy, and gender I'm giving it as male, and he is from New Jersey. Now if I exit this one, sorry, I've just given the wrong syntax here. I forgot to add these values. Let's exit it. See, one reflected. Now you can check the table. Select star from customers. So it is accepting all the cities whatever I passed, right? But now I'll create one rule where that rule will have the functionality like the column, one range, like it has to accept only Hyderabad, Bangalore, Chennai, and Mumbai. Let's declare it. First, let's see the syntax to declare the variables. Sorry, rule. Create rule name as conditional expression. Let's see the example. Create rule name customers table, right? That is cust. Otherwise directly I'll write like this: gender underscore rule as gender in. I think we are trying to create the rule for city, right? City underscore rule. So let me name this one as city in Hyderabad, Bangalore, Chennai, Mumbai. Let's create it. Commands completed successfully. Now let's see how to bind the rule to a column. To bind the rule, so whenever you want to bind the rule to a column, we have a system stored procedure called sp underscore bind rule. Sp underscore bind rule. Which rule you want to bind? Just specify the name of the rule and which object you want to bind. Just specify it. Let's see that example. sp underscore bind rule. So I'm gonna bind city underscore rule to customers table, customers ID gender column, sorry, city column, customers table, city column. Now let's execute it. See, rule bound to table column. Now let me insert the record into the table. Insert into customers values. I'm giving the employee ID as 2 and name of an employee as Sharath, and gender male, city Hyderabad. Now if I execute this one will insert the record. Why? Because the value, the city value which you are inserting, that is within the range only. But if you try to insert the record which is not in the range, let me give the employee ID as 3, name of an employee as Madhu, and male, and he is from California. Now if I try to insert this one, see, now this one is throwing a message saying that conflicted with rule imposed by the some statement. So the insert statement is terminated. So this is how we can bind the rules to a column, which acts like a check constant. Now let's see how to unbind the rule. Now my job is done with that rule. I don't want to maintain that rule on that column. So I want to unbind the rule. So to unbind the rule, you have a system soap user called sp underscore unbind rule. Unbind rule, from which object you want to unbind the rule. Just specify the name of that object. That's it. Let's see an example now. sp underscore unbind rule. So what is that object name? Employee dot, what is the column? So it's not employee, it's city, right? Sorry, customers, right? Customers dot city column. Now if I execute this one, rule unbound from the table column. Now if I try to insert the city, whatever the city may be, it will accept. Why? Because now I just unbinded the rule there. This is how we can unbind the rules from a column. Now like this, I created the rule and I binded that rule in all the columns where it has required, and I unbinded the rule from all the columns. And now my intention is, I just want to drop the rule because no column is using that rule. So why we need to maintain the rule? Unnecessary burden, right? Space issues. So to drop the rule, rule name. Let's see an example here. Drop rule. So what is the name of the rule which you want to drop? I want to drop that city rule, city underscore rule. Now let's execute and see. Commands completed successfully. So this is rule. Clear? Now let's see the next one, that is default. So default acts like default constant. Already I explained that one, right? So directly we'll see how to create the default and how to bind this default to a column and how to unbind the defaults and how to drop the defaults. So first let's see to create default. Syntax: create default, default name as conditional expression. So that is the syntax. Let's see an example now. Create default. So I'm giving the default name as city underscore def, as I want to pass Hyderabad as the default value. Hyderabad as a default value. Let me create the default. Command completed successfully. Now let's see how to bind the defaults. To bind the defaults, default syntax. So again, to bind the default, we have a system structure called sp underscore bin default. Just observe the difference between this rule and default. Sp underscore bind rule, sp underscore bin default. D will be silent in default, so double D will be there, it won't be there. Okay, the bind is a bin default bind rule. So bin default, which default you want to bind, and to which object you want to bind the rule. Sorry, bind the default. Just specify the name of that object. Let me show you that example here. sp underscore bin default. So what is the name of the default? City underscore def. What is to which object you want to bind that default? To customers table city column. Now let me bind it. So if the user inserts pass any value, accept it. If the user didn't pass any value into the column, then by default populate this value as Hyderabad. Let's see. Let me insert a couple of records. Insert into customers values. Let me check how many records are there in the table. Select star from customers. 3 records. Okay. So insert into customers values. I'm giving the customer ID as 4. Name of an employee Pranay, and gender of an employee male, and city I'm giving it as Bangalore. It will accept. So if you pass any value into the city column, it will accept it. Let me show you the table. It has accepted the Bangalore. Now let me insert one record without city value. Insert into customers. I just know the ID of an employee, name of an employee, and gender of an employee. So ID is 5, name of an employee is Prabhu, and gender is male again. So I don't know his city. So when I insert the record without city, see, by default it has populated the value as Hyderabad. This is default. Now let's see how to unbind the default from the column. To unbind the default. So to unbind the default, the syntax will be, we have a system structure called sp underscore unbind default. Unbind default, and from which object you want to unbind the default, just specify the name of the object. That's it. sp underscore unbind default. I want to unbind city underscore def from customers table city column. That's it. Now let's execute it. The default I unbinded. Now if you insert the record without the city, it won't populate the default value. It will just show it as null. Insert into customers values. Customer ID I'm giving it as 6, and name of an employee is Sunil, and gender of an employee I'm giving it as male. So I just know only these 3 values: ID of an employee, name of an employee, gender of an employee. That's it. Now let's execute it. One row affected. If you check the table, select star from customers. See, has populated the value as null. So this is how we can unbind the defaults from the column. Now let's see how to drop the default. To drop the default, syntax drop default name. So let's see the example. Drop default name. So what is the name of the default? That is city underscore def, right? Now let's execute it. Commands completed successfully. So this is how we can create the defaults. We can bind the defaults, we can unbind the defaults, and we can drop the defaults. Clear? So that's it for today, and we'll see the next session.